Alright, everybody, peace. Welcome to the Starter Broadly Basketball Show. Wherever or however you're listening, we're so grateful to have you here with us. As you guys know, I'm your host, Sean Cottle, and we've got a wonderful show for you guys. Listen, college basketball is officially back. We're going to be starting off with, we're going to be covering some of the biggest games in women's college basketball that took place yesterday. One of them taking place in Paris. An exciting matchup between Notre Dame and South Carolina. We're also going to be discussing the match between LSU and Colorado. Should we be concerned about what's going on in Baton Rouge? And we're also going to be discussing the debut of James Harden for the LA Clippers. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, guys, and we're not going to have a preamble today. We're not going to have a monologue. We're just going to go ahead and get right into it today. But before we get started, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay up to date on all of our latest content that we post daily. And if you would like to support our network and our company, you can do so by following the link in the ticker below. It's streamelements.com/sorrytobotheryoushow/tip. Once again, it's streamelements.com/sorrytobotheryoushow/tip. None of this is possible without you guys as fans, so we're so grateful and honored for all the love and support that you show us, because it's a pleasure to have this platform. And be sure to follow us on Patreon as well. You can do so by going to patreon.com, clicking on the search bar, and typing in Sorry to Bother You Show. That way you can get access to all of our exclusive content that we post daily. But with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and get right into it, shall we? Like I was stating in our opening segment, soliloquy, South Carolina and Notre Dame had an amazing matchup yesterday in Paris, France. This was actually the first game, collegiate NCAA game, that took place, regular season game, in Paris. So obviously it was a huge milestone, huge occasion, huge event, and it did not disappoint. Last year, what many consider the best team in the country in South Carolina squared off against the regular season ACC champ from last year in Notre Dame. And there was a lot of cause for concern coming into the season for South Carolina, because they had lost all 5 of their starters. They had lost Leah Boston, Zaya Cook, and Bree Beal, and they lost all their starters. And this was going to be a young team from South Carolina that was going to rely on their underclassmen and rely on the recruits they brought in. They had the number 2 ranked recruiting class for 2023. So there was going to be a lot of big shoes to fill. At South Carolina. But something that Dawn Staley has always done a good job doing is recruiting and bringing in players, especially from outside the state. And this year was no different with the recruits she brought in. And if we look at Notre Dame, Notre Dame, as you guys know, was the regular season ACC champion last year. And remember, we did our NCAA predictions. I actually predicted Notre Dame to make it to the Final Four to square off against South Carolina. However, they ended up losing to Virginia Tech in the Elite Eight, a team that they actually beat twice during the regular season. Their all-conference guard, and quite frankly their all-American guard, Olivia Miles, still recovering from a knee injury that she suffered from late last year. You guys know how I feel about Olivia Miles. I think she's the best point guard in women's college basketball when healthy, and I think she's one of the best players in women's college basketball as well. No question, she'll be a top 3 pick when she decides to come out for the WNBA draft. But however, Notre Dame had an amazing recruiting class as well, bringing in one of the best point guards from the 23 class, and Helena Hidalgo. And listen, she listen, this was an amazing game in terms of showcasing the talent that is currently in women's college basketball. And remember, one thing I said about the WNBA was that this is the most talent that has ever been in the WNBA at one point in its since its inception. And I can say the same thing about women's college basketball this year, just based on what I've seen in one day, across the board, right? This is the most talent that I've seen in women's college basketball at one time. Listen, we just look at Notre Dame. Listen, Sonia Citron, all ACC second team. Elena DeWolf, grad transfer. Like I said, Elena Hidalgo, freshman. She might be in contention for ACC freshman of the year, as well as being an all ACC player if she performs how she did against South Carolina over the course of the season. And Maddie Westbell, who's one of the best stretch fours in the big. Kylie Watson, the transfer from Oregon, obviously. Nikki Marshall from coming off the bench for Notre Dame, and Prosper as well, the freshman that came in the beginning of the spring semester, actually played that last half of the season. So Notre Dame has a lot of talent. They're top heavy, just like they were last year. However, they don't have much depth. And big shout out to one of my good friends, Anna. She was one of the best friends I met while I was in Europe, and definitely looking forward to seeing her when I come back. Thank you, Anna, for tuning into the show. But we look at South Carolina. Listen, they did a good job of reloading and picking up, or replacing players that they lost last year. One of the big ones being Tahani Pau, a transfer from Oregon. Listen, she was one of the best 3-point shooters in the country, and from last year, and she fills a spot that was needed to be filled for South Carolina. We all know how much they struggled shooting the ball last year. They were one of the worst 3-point shooting percentage teams in women's college basketball. However, they had one of the highest field goal percentages because they shot so efficiently from inside the 3-point line. And Pau shot 2-4 from the three-point line last night, had 14 points, 6 assists. Raven Johnson, who was the number one point guard in her class, now sophomore, had 11 points and 7 assists. Bree Hall, who's one of the better defenders on South Carolina, has 7 points. Camila Cardoza, who is by many considered to be the best player in women's college basketball outside of Caitlin Clark. Listen, she had 20 points, 15 rebounds, and 4 blocks. And a lot of people say that Cardozo is only labeled as one of the best players because of her size. She's 6'7". However, Cardozo has amazing touch around the basket as well as amazing footwork, something that she's improved upon over the course of her time at South Carolina. But she has great defensive presence as well. She only had 2 fouls during the game to counter that to 4 blocks. So she does a great job of staying engaged and not overplaying and using her height to an advantage. So when you see her play, she's more than just her size. She's a phenomenal player. And Chloe Kitts, who was the top recruit from her class, also came in the middle of the season last year, had 7 points, 2 assists, and they go so deep on the bench. Leading off with Ashley Watkins, who is starting to develop. She's also one of the top recruits from her class. She had 7 points and 5 rebounds. And Sanaya Fagan, who's one of the better bigs from her class as well, also had 12 points and 2 rebounds. And 4 rebounds, sorry. And the big recruit that everyone's talking about, obviously, is Malaysia Fawiley, who had an amazing play. Freshman from South Carolina, 17 points, 6 assists, 6 steals. But it shows how deep South Carolina is because I can't make the argument that Fawiley should be starting over Pau or Johnson or Hall. That shows how dominant South Carolina is. And not to get too ahead of ourselves, but I do believe that South Carolina will be one of the best teams in the country, and you can make the case just based on what we've seen so far and what they did against a highly touted Notre Dame team that South Carolina will be back in the Final Four. But not to get too ahead of ourselves. And what South Carolina, what they remind me of is how Alabama dominates teams in the second half. If you watch this game, all throughout the first half, it was highly contested. Hidalgo for Notre Dame did a great job of keeping Notre Dame close. I believe Hidalgo had 20 points in the first half. But what happens is South Carolina starts to impose their will physically. Listen, they out rebounded Notre Dame by five rebounds, and we know Notre Dame was one of the best rebounding teams in the country last year. So they did a great job of limiting possessions for Notre Dame, and they managed to impose the real physically, and they forced Notre Dame into 12 turnovers in the second half alone, and they scored 30 points off of those turnovers. So South Carolina did a great job of creating extra possessions, easy possessions for themselves, and that's a testament to their dominance and to their physicality, and obviously like I said, Notre Dame is no slouch. Notre Dame is one of the best teams in women's college basketball. They're one of the best teams in ACC. Some people would argue it's between them and Virginia Tech for the best teams in ACC, but listen, South Carolina is doing this against a highly touted team, and South Carolina looks like they're in mid-season shape on the first game of the season. You guys know that it takes a couple weeks, especially in college, for teams to kind of get their rhythm, get a feel for each other, and get used to playing at a game-like speed. Because it's hard to simulate that in practice. You really can't. But they look like they're in mid-season shape, and that's a scary sight for the rest of women's college basketball. But I thought this was a great game. I thought this was a great showcase for the talent across the board for women's college basketball. Great experience, a great opportunity for two black women head coaches, and Neil Ivey and obviously Dawn Staley. Shows the growth and development of the sport, and it's exciting to see where these teams go moving forward over the course of the season. And we're going to be here to cover all of it. But in our next segment, guys, we are going to be discussing another team from the SEC that didn't put on as great a performance as South Carolina did. So be sure to stick around for all of that, guys. You are not going to miss it. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. In case you missed the first segment of our show, we just discussed the matchup between South Carolina and Notre Dame to open up the season for women's college basketball, and why that was such a huge moment for the sport. And it did a great job of showcasing the amount of talent that is in women's college basketball at this point in time. And this is the most talent that's ever been in women's college basketball at any point since I've been watching women's college basketball, at least. So, this is a great opportunity, great showcase for the sport. And in this segment, guys, we're going to be discussing another matchup for women's college basketball, and that's between the number one ranked team, defending champion LSU Tigers, against the number 20 ranked Colorado Buffalo. And listen, this game didn't turn out as many people expected it would. A lot of people expected LSU to be dominant and to have a good chance of repeating as national champions, especially with them bringing in the most sought-after transfer in the portal with Haley Van Lith from Louisville, who was an all-ACC player and ACC freshman of the year, her freshman year. And listen, they brought her in, and so many people thought, okay, matching her with Angel Reese and Phil J. Johnson and Morrow will do a good job of creating a balance and adding an extra offensive weapon to LSU, and that will make them that much more unstoppable. That's what many people thought. However, based on what we saw yesterday, it seems to be there's still a little bit of chemistry issues that need to be adjusted and fixed for LSU. What I noticed is the ball sticks too much, particularly in Reese's and Van Lift's hands. And I don't want to read too much into this because, like I said, it takes a couple games for teams to get adjusted and used to playing at that actual game speed. So I don't want to read too much into the first game of the season, but specifically on the offensive end, I think is where LSU, in my opinion, based on what I saw, is where LSU struggled in terms of getting easier scoring opportunities. They can get easier scoring opportunities if they get more side rotations of the ball, meaning getting more wing-to-wing rotations and just getting more movement, a lot of more weak side movement as well. The ball started to stick, especially in the second half, which is when Colorado went on that run, and that leads to tougher scoring opportunities because now the help side, specifically of the defense, gets to stand put, and now you're shooting over the help and the on-ball defender, and that's where LSU struggled because they didn't get enough rotations of the ball wing to wing. But also, listen, Colorado shot 53% from the field, 43% from the 3-point line. They had an amazing game. Listen, their Foreman and Vonleh combined for 52 points, and you get hats off to them, man. And Foreman shot 7-11 from the 3-point line. If that's what it takes for Colorado to beat LSU, if you're LSU, you live with that. You say, okay, man, we took away what she does best. She shot 7-11 from the 3-point line. She took what we gave her. That's fine. You live with that. And then how often in the season is Morrow gonna go 2 for 9, Van Lift go 4 for 11, and Flo Johnson only shoot 3 shots? That's just not gonna that's not gonna happen. That's very rarely is that gonna happen if you're on the season, if you're LSU. So you don't want to read too much into it. Defensively, though, something that LSU did great in last year, they struggled with this in this first game, especially defending the ball screen. If I'm LSU, I am slightly concerned about that. However, they're all things that can be fixed, and so I wouldn't be too concerned about what I saw from LSU, but just things to take into account. But if you had to ask me based on what I saw between LSU and South Carolina, no question about it, South Carolina is the best team in the SEC based on what I saw. And listen, and this shouldn't be a surprise for anybody. This is something that I was saying last year, even that South Carolina is the best team in the country. And I don't think there's any debate that South Carolina were to have beaten Iowa in the Final Four and then, be matched with LSU in the national championship game, that South Carolina would have beat LSU. Listen, South Carolina beat LSU 2 times in the regular season last year, one time by 20 points, another time by 10. So it's no question that South Carolina was the best team in the conference and in the country last year. They just played a bad game on the wrong day, but that's part of the game. That's part of college basketball. But another bright spot for LSU was Samaya Smith coming off the bench. The sophomore shot 6-8 from the field, 4-5 from the free throw line, 16 points, 5 rebounds. Having that spark to come off the bench would be huge for LSU, because we know that LSU didn't really have too deep of a bench last year. So If Smith can come off the bench and provide a spark and a boost of energy and rebounding presence for LSU, that will be huge and beneficial for them moving forward over the course of the season. But that is what I saw from this matchup between LSU and Colorado, guys. Let me know what you guys think about that, though. Leave your thoughts in the chat room. I would love to hear all about it. But in our next segment, guys, we are going to be discussing the debut of James Harden for the LA Clippers. We're going to talk a lot about that, guys. So you're not going to miss any of that, I promise you. So be sure to stick around, and we'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. In case you missed the first two segments of our show, we just discussed the two of the biggest games to open the season for women's college basketball with LSU Colorado and Notre Dame South Carolina. And I just discussed how both of those games are really a great representation of where women's college basketball is at right now, and how this is the most talent I've seen in women's college basketball at least since I've started watching women's college basketball. But I would beg to argue that this is the most talent that's been in women's college basketball since its inception. Just a plethora of talent. It shows how much the game is evolving and growing, and it's a great space. It's a great space for women's college basketball. But in this segment, in our last segment, guys, I want to discuss what we're all wanting to talk about, and that's the debut of James Harden for the Los Angeles Clippers the other day. So we'll go ahead and get right into that. As you guys know, the James Harden made his debut the other night for the LA Clippers against the New York Knicks. The Clippers ended up losing this game 97-111. It was a home game for New York. James Harden had 17 points, 6 assists, 3 rebounds, 6 of 9 from the field, 2 of 4 from the 3-point line, a plus minus of minus 18. Russell Westbrook had 17 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 8 of 13 from the field, 1 of 3 from the 3-point line. And Kawhi Leonard had 18 points, 3 assists, 5 rebounds, 8 of 16 from the field, 2 of 6 from the 3-point line. And Paul George had 10 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 of 11 from the field, and 1 of 6 from the 3-point line. And one thing that was surprising to me, one thing that stood out to me was, first of all, the starting lineup. It appears that Ty Lue is going to, based on what happened in the first game, he started Harden and Westbrook in at the same time, which was surprising to me. I was willing to bet my check that they'd have Westbrook coming off the bench, and you know, when this trade first happened, I said that this doesn't necessarily make the Clippers better, but I still think the Clippers are the biggest threat to Denver to come out of the West. But I said that even before they made the trades for James Harden. And after seeing this now, it looks like that there's going to be more chemistry adjustments than I initially thought. You could tell that people who's going to suffer the most from this is Russell Westbrook, and also Paul George as well. Paul George is someone who does a great job. He can play the point forward, but with James Harden there, you kind of alleviate him of having to do that. So you move Paul George to strictly almost pretty much coming off the ball. Now he's coming off more pin downs and staggers. And remember, if you guys remember a couple years ago, something that Paul George stressed that made him frustrated was that Doc Rivers was trying to use Paul George how he used Ray Allen, which come off a lot of flex cuts and pin downs and staggers and flares, having him play more like a 2 guard as opposed to a point forward. And that was something that Paul George struggled with. And that's what Paul George is going to be relegated to with the addition of James Harden. So Ty Lue is going to have to find a way to get Paul George on the ball more, because we see that he's comfortable with that. But Paul George is still capable of playing off the ball. But you can tell he's more comfortable with the ball in his hands. Kawhi Leonard is going to be able to get into his space, get to his spots. No matter who he plays with, that's what happens when you're a great player. You can play with any system, with anybody. And you know, that's just how it is. And the bench for the Clippers still was fantastic with some PJ Tucker, obviously, and Plumlee and Highland and Powell. But one thing that is a cause for concern is now the defensive capability of the Clippers. Listen, the Clippers were one of the best teams defensively last year. James Harden doesn't necessarily bring much defensively, and neither really does Russell Westbrook. Westbrook gambles a lot, which is why his steals are so high. But great in terms of being an actual on-ball defender, that's not what Westbrook is known for. So now your backcourt is at a disadvantage defensively. So now that puts more pressure on your front court like Zubac and even Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And now you're at a disadvantage defensively, but also another place where they become a liability is defensively, is rebounding. Listen, the Clippers only had 31 rebounds and compared to 48 rebounds for the Knicks. So getting out rebounded by a Knicks team, though the Knicks were one of the best rebounding teams in the league last year, and they're continuing to be that. This early on in the season, that's still not a good sign. So that lack of size in the starting starting five for the Clippers is a cause for concern. So will they decide to start PJ Tucker to get a little more size? Or will they decide to start Plumlee to get more size? Those are things that that Ty Lue is going to have to think about and going to have to consider. But I still think that Ty Lue's who's one of the best coaches in the NBA. I do think he's going to find a way to figure it out, which is why I wouldn't have too much of a cause for concern for the Clippers and based on what I saw last night or the other night. But I do think that they will be at some point moving Russell Westbrook to the bench as a 6-man role. But listen, if Russell Westbrook moves to the bench, now he becomes the best 6-man in the NBA, and it makes your bench that much more dynamic for the Clippers. But we'll see what Ty Lue and the Clippers decide to do. I wouldn't have too much cause for concern if you're a Clippers fan. It's one game, and it's barely 3 weeks into the season. Don't worry, give it time. It takes a while, especially when you got a plethora of talent like this on a roster. It takes a while for guys to kind of gel and build together. We've seen this countless times with the Warriors when KD first joined the team. We see it with the Miami Heat. We've seen it with the Cleveland Cavaliers when LeBron first got back to Cleveland. We've seen it with the Lakers when they first traded for Anthony Davis. This is normal. You're gonna go through these growing pains. You're gonna have these moments where you're learning how each other plays. So this is all part of the process. I wouldn't stress too much about it. But let me know what you guys think in the chat room. What do you guys think about this? Is there a cause for concern? Are you guys worried about what you saw? I would love to hear all about it, guys. Leave your thoughts in the chat room. But with that being said, that's it for our show for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a wonderful show. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay updated on all our latest content. Be sure to follow us on Patreon as well. You can do so by going to patreon.com, clicking on the search bar, and typing in "Sorry to Bother You" show. That way you can get access to all of our exclusive content that we post daily. And if you'd like to support our network and our company, you can do so by following the link in the ticker below. It's streamelements.com/sorry-to-bother-you-show/tip. Once again, it's streamelements.com/sorry-to-bother-you-show/tip. Listen, none of this is possible without you guys as fans, so we're so grateful and honored for all the love and support that you show us, because it's an honor to have this platform and share with you guys my thoughts and insight on the world of basketball, especially being a professional basketball player. Being able to give an extra bit of insight, a different perspective that you don't typically hear on mainstream media. It's an honor to have this platform, and I know that's why a lot of you guys come and check us out, because we provide a perspective, an unbiased perspective that you don't typically get in mainstream media. So we are we're honored for that, and we're grateful for that. Absolutely. But that being said, guys, we'll be back again same time tomorrow, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, guys, continue to stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions, and peace.